Hi guys. I would love to know if any of you are back in school. I know that some of the schools opened up last week, but also know from talking to some parents that have kindergartners that not the whole class gets to go back, even if the parents want them to. So I know it's still kind of a process and things like that, and it's something that we're just going to have to just kind of keep trudging through. Who knows if you're going to go back to school in person before June when school's out, or if that's something that's going to happen in September. But we're going to get through this one way or another. But if you are going back to school, have your parents send me a note. Let me know how it's going. I'd love to know how it's going for you. So for the last few weeks, we've been talking about. Remember last week I was talking about in the Bible here. We're talking about the Old Testament. So in my Bible, this part right here, the bigger part, that's the Old Testament, and the smaller part's the New Testament. So in 2 years, we're trying to get all the information out of this, but there's no way we're even going to come close to getting all the information out of this. So we're doing the best we can and learning about it. So last year we learned about the first half of the Old Testament. Now we're doing the last half, and a lot of that's the prophets and things like that. And it's some hard things to understand, but we're doing the best we can to understand that. And so that's where our stories are coming, and that's why we're talking about. Lately, we've been talking about Elijah, Elisha, Jonah, and Hosea, and we'll be talking about Isaiah and some other prophets coming up next and stuff, but that's where we're talking about. So we've been talking about how the kingdom was separated into a north and south portion. So there's obviously the green is the north portion, and that's where we've been talking about the last few weeks and stuff like that, and their kings were really, really bad, and so these prophets were going to them. The kings were not obeying God at all. And so today, what we're going to find out is pretty much God finally had enough, and he, remember we've always talked about consequences a lot, and so when we do something wrong, there are consequences. So today, we find out about what those consequences are. So let me, I forgot to start my thing, but while you're watching the video, I'll start my clock. I'll take a few minutes off, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, watch the video here, guys.
God had done so many good things for the Israelites. He had rescued the Israelites from slavery in Egypt and had taken care of them in a new land. He made a covenant with them and promised to be their God. Even though God loved them like a father, the Israelites forgot about God. They acted in the same way as the nations who did not know and love God.
They worshiped things that were not God, and they did exactly what God told them not to do. So God sent prophets to warn the people to stop doing evil things. Did Israel listen? No. The prophets said bad things would happen if they did not obey God. Did Israel obey? No. In fact, they sinned even more.
Finally, God had enough. He loved his people too much to let them continue in their sin and rebellion. So God punished the people of Israel by letting their enemies take over. Hoshea was the last king of Israel, the northern king. King Hoshea did evil things like the kings before him.
But Hoshea had to do whatever the king of Assyria told him to do. Instead of asking God to help his people, Hoshea secretly asked the king of Egypt to protect Israel from Assyria. Now that Hoshea had a deal with Egypt, he stopped giving money to the king of Assyria.
One day, the king of Assyria and his army attacked Israel. King Hoshea was thrown into prison. The Assyrian army surrounded the city of Samaria, the capital of Israel. Samaria had a strong wall around the city. For 3 years, the Assyrians attacked the city. They did not let anyone bring supplies into the city. Finally, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and force a people to leave their homes. He bound them together with ropes and hooks, and he made them walk hundreds of miles to Assyria. The northern kingdom of Israel was destroyed.
When the Israelites disobeyed God again and again, God punished them by removing them from his presence. We disobey God, but Jesus took the punishment for our sin upon himself. Jesus brings us into God's presence and keeps us there.
Okay, watch the video. I took 2 minutes off the clock, and I'm going to start my clock, and here we go. So there's so many things to talk about today that we'd run out of time if I told you everything I want to tell you about this story. So I'm just going to try to condense it down to what I see as the most important things, the things that we really need to talk about. And, the thing is, if we were in class and you didn't understand something, you could ask me questions and stuff like that. So if there's things today I say or you saw in the video and you don't understand, please, please, please ask your parents about that. Even when we're together in class, I always tell your parents at the end of the class what we talk about, so that after you go home, you can talk with your parents about what it was we talked about in class, because that's really important, that you keep talking about it with your parents. So, okay, so here's the main points from the story, that sin is dangerous. When we disobey God, when we don't do the right thing, that's sin. And that is dangerous, and it leads us away from God, which is what was happening with the Israelites. God hates sin because it hurts people, and he loves us. Okay, so maybe a story illustration that might help you understand this a little bit better was, think of it like this. Would your mom and dad buy you a fully grown tiger, a hungry tiger, as a pet? Okay, because if that tiger was going to hurt you, and if it's hungry, it's certainly going to hurt you and try to eat you. So would your parents say it was okay to own it as a pet? It's like, no, that'd be ridiculous. They would not bring something to you, give you something that would harm you, okay? And so your parents will keep you from that. Or if they see you about ready to do something, sometimes they will let you try something if it's not going to hurt you real bad. But for example, if they tell you don't cross the street, you got to look to see if a car's coming first. If they're walking along with you and you start to cross the street and they see a car coming, they're not going to say, oh, I'm going to let Johnny find out what happens when he walks out in front of the car. No, they're going to grab you and pull you back because they love you so much. And so that's kind of what God did here. He needed to take them out of the place they were, and which, because this was the land of Israel was where their temples were, where the priests were, and things like that. And so he's actually removed them from there to get their attention, because where they went to, where they were taken to these other places, Assyria and things like that, the Assyrians did not believe in God at all. They had their own idols and things like that. And so they were totally removed from God's presence, because at that time, that was just how they were in God's presence, was to be by the temples and the priests and things like that. So they were removed from God's presence, which was a very sad thing, okay? So he needed to do that to get them back to the point where they would see how desperate they were to get back to him, get back to Israel, to be part of what they knew, and to get back to loving God. And so that's the essence, and so that was their punishment, was to take them away from it. They would eventually come back, but it was going to be a long, long time. So that was the punishment. Their consequences was to be that. So I'm running out of time, so let me get back to kind of the takeaways, what we need to remember from this. So The Israelites didn't realize how badly their sin was hurting them, and so God removed them from, at that time, what his presence was. Today, we're not saying that's how it was in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, we're under the law of the New Testament. They were under the law of the Old Testament, so it's different today. We can be in God's presence right here. I can be in God's presence right here, right now. And so we'll be talking about that too, and stuff. So that's their sin. Because their sin, he took them away from his presence. Today, Jesus brings us back into his presence when we talk about the bridge illustration. Because Jesus died on the cross, that removes our sin and makes the bridge for us to have a relationship with God so we can be in his presence. And the way we are is because of his Holy Spirit. And so that's a good thing for you to talk to your parents about, is how can we be in God's presence today because of the Spirit. So that's a good thing for you to talk about with your parents. I am out of time. Our verse for this month, it's a great one, Deuteronomy 6:5, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. That's it for now, but let me pray real quick and then we're done. Dear Jesus, thank you for our lesson today, and pray that that would be a reminder that that we need to obey you and avoid sin, because sin, if we are living in sin or if we're doing sinful things, that's going to hurt us. And so help us to remember this verse, Deuteronomy 6:5, so that we can love you with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Because that is the way that we can obey you and follow you best, and that will help us to stay away from sinful situations. We ask all these things in your son's name. Amen. Okay, guys, good spending time with you again, and I'll see you next week. Bye.